Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of We Witnessed. My name is Chip Brewster. I'm a host for the digital side of Nexstar Media. If you haven't heard the name Nexstar Media, you might have heard one of our local TV stations because we have more than 115 newsrooms across the country. What does that mean for me as a Nexstar guy? That means access to archives that stretch back decades. Many of the biggest national stories began as local stories, and what we do here on this program is reflect on those. In this episode, we are taking a story that began in Las Vegas, Nevada, but had immediate national headlines back in 1996 when Tupac Shakur was shot. For those that aren't aware of the information, we'll begin with a little 40-second synopsis of what happened that night in Las Vegas.
A man seen in life sometimes as a criminal.
I want straight up not guilty.
But in death as a crime victim. On the night of September 7th, 25-year-old Tupac Shakur went to see the Mike Tyson fight. He left the match with Death Row Records chief Suge Knight, and as they drove down the Vegas Strip, police say 4 men opened fire, grazing Knight, but riddling Shakur's chest with 4 bullet holes. After remaining in critical condition all week, he died.
Tupac Shakur passed away at UMC at 4:03 p.m. Friday, September the 13th, 1996. Physicians have listed cause of death due to respiratory failure and cardiopulmonary arrest.
And while, of course, KLAS was on the scene that night for the interview for the first part of our We Witness, we're going to talk to the woman who literally wrote the book on Tupac Shakur's shooting. So let me bring in Cathy Scott. Cathy, at the time, you were a reporter with the Las Vegas Sun. So you went out to the scene, you followed the story, and here we are at this point, nearly 30 years later, still talking about this. Did you have any idea at the time that this was going to be as big of a story as it remains?
Well, I covered murder in Las Vegas, so, there were a lot of those, but not as big as this one. I got a call from a homicide cop at like 1:30 in the morning, and I was asleep and just threw on some clothes and grabbed a notebook and went out to the scene, and I've been covering it ever since. I think by the next day, because of all the TV and all the reporters a lot of people called me out of New York, especially because the detectives wouldn't talk to any out-of-town media. They would only talk to local media. It's as if they didn't want the story to go national, but because they were a little stingy about it, it made the case even bigger. It made reporters want it, they all came out. I mean, at the first, there was only one news conference. It was Monday. And in Las Vegas, at a press conference, you get maybe 5 people, print, radio and TV, and there were about 50 reporters there, and the sergeant looked like he was a deer caught in headlights, and they couldn't make it go away, but they certainly weren't forthcoming with anything about the case. So I love a challenge, and so I just went up, under, around, and everywhere else to get my contacts and find out what went on.
Did you know when you were going out to the scene, and we've been looking at some of the footage from 1996 of the scene, that Tupac was the one who had been shot? Like, how long did it take to find that out?
Well, I was a watcher of MTV, so I knew who he was. My favorite song was Dear Mama. And the person who called me, I haven't given up that person's name yet, but the source said, hey, you need to go out to the Las Vegas Strip, told me where, and said there's a big rapper by the name of Tupac Shakur. So he couldn't even pronounce his name, Tupac Shakur. And so I knew who Tupac was, and I headed out. Of course, we didn't have Google back then, so I couldn't search anything. It was all street and telephone calls and emails and stuff. That's how I did my research.
You mentioned that because the police department was kind of keeping things close to the vest out of the gate, not only nationally, but even locally, that made you want to dig in even more as a reporter. Would you almost credit that for having latched onto it decades of following this and then ultimately writing the book, The Shooting of Tupac Shakur?
Well, to me, it was like, what are they hiding? What don't they want to say? It's a murder case. Just share it with us. So, I mean, I had sources within the Metropolitan Police Department, and they knew that we were being shut down. And I got from a higher up, second level, from the sheriff that one of the reasons he wasn't sharing things was they just wanted the case to go away. It would be bad publicity for the town. It would hurt tourism, was what I was told. So,
interesting.
Of course, I mean, the town is built on tourism.
Yeah.
That's what they from the top. That's why they tried to, and trying to hide it and not talking about it made people, go after it. Not just me, but everybody else go after it. I love a challenge, and it turned out to be fruitful for me.
Yeah, and in fact, one of the stories that I have from 1996 from the Nexstar station KLAS is about the number of people expressing interest. Let's take about a minute and a half to reflect and hear back to one of those stories now.
Marketing, this is Nancy. May I help you? Okay, he's in critical condition.
University Medical Center is receiving thousands of phone calls from all over the country. People are sending thoughts and prayers over the phone lines to rapper Tupac Shakur.
And this is the most phone calls I think we've had on any patient that's been here in the hospital. It has been absolutely phenomenal.
The 25-year-old rap star has had 2 surgeries. During one of those, he had a lung removed. He was shot twice after attending Saturday night's fight between Mike Tyson and Bruce Seldon at the MGM Grand Hotel. Investigators have little to go on.
They have no motive and next to nothing when it comes to suspect information. How can a shooting happen Saturday night around 11 o'clock at a busy intersection after a title fight and witnesses not see anything, including witnesses with Shakur's entourage?
It amazes me that when we have professional bodyguards as part of this entourage, that they can't even give us an accurate description of the vehicle.
Investigators working this case are checking into possible gang connections in New York and Los Angeles.
Of course, that was at the time. So much had been found since. Cathy, your own investigation. We don't need to stay in 1996. Let's talk about the information that you found out that ultimately went into your book about that night. We just heard that at the time, witnesses weren't giving testimony. They weren't giving descriptions. And ultimately, that's because of the culture that this was 2 rival gangs, and that's what caused this incident. And just the way that they behaved, they did not share things with police.
Oh, exactly. There was a bloodbath the next day in Compton. It's a twofer. You did this to me, I do this to you. It's a 2-for-1. So they. Someone in the car was killed. Several people were killed. So they took care of justice themselves. And so, no, they weren't going to cooperate. Suge Knight, who was driving and was Tupac's producer at the time, it took them months to get him to go into homicide unit. And he had a house in Vegas. And Suge did, and they finally got him in. He said nothing, told them nothing, because they took care of it themselves, And Cathy D, who was the driver of the car in which the shooter was in, they didn't get him, Orlando Anderson got dead himself 6 months later, unrelated to Tupac's murder. So while there were people in the car who were killed, the shooter wasn't, and the driver and the person who provided the gun were not. And now justice is taking its role in that, taking care of it finally.
Do you think that is still playing a role in not just the investigation, but in any witness testimony? Because we still haven't really had anyone that definitively went, I was there, this is the person that pulled the trigger. Even Cathy D's talks on media and in his book, it still wasn't like this is exactly how it went down. It's still kind of a little hazy, if you will.
Yeah, and it's street justice, and that's the stuff that happens all the time. And this wasn't well, it was gang related, but it was Tupac, Tupac's walking from the MGM Grand. Mm-hmm. They run into Orlando Anderson, who didn't have a ticket. He's waiting for his homies against Elevator Bank, and Tupac goes by with Suge and his entourage. And one of Tupac's friends says, "Hey, that's Orlando, and he's the one who grabbed my necklace off my neck, 2 months ago, a death throat necklace." And that's all it was. They beat him up. They kicked him. It's on video at MGM. We didn't get that MGM Grand video, and that was police didn't give it to us. It was a source from within the MGM who leaked. I wasn't the only one they leaked it to. They leaked it to the Las Vegas Review-Journal too. It took leaking for us to get to it. But anyway, so that was, you did this to me, you beat me up, now we're going to go get you. And so Keefe D got a gun, went and bought a gun, and you can buy them 24 hours a day in Vegas, and went and found him. Everybody knew where Tupac would be playing. Mm-hmm. He was going to be playing at a club, and they saw him driving up. They were driving up and down the Strip, and Flamingo, where the club was, saw him at a stoplight, and then just rat-a-tat-tat, like Bonnie and Clyde.
And it was
justice was done in their eyes, and so they were done with it.
And it was about a week later, I believe 6 days, that he actually passed away. And of course, what makes this one different from the you mentioned this kind of gang, the street justice happening every day, was the prominence of Tupac Shakur. And just to demonstrate that example, again, KLAS in Las Vegas, they did this story from 1996.
Cold day in the rap hip-hop music world. In case you haven't heard, it's been all over the media, all over the news, all over the radio. Rapper Tupac Shakur has passed away.
I'd like to say condolences to Tupac's family.
I think he was a great person. I learned a lot about him by reading about him and everything, and he did a lot of good stuff for his community.
Let's go for another one, High KCEP.
A lot of our young brothers out there would start to get along a little bit better and stop coming up with the old adage when one looked at the other one that he's mad dogging me. We would live a happier life, and things like this wouldn't have to happen.
All right, sir, that's well put. And of course, we thank you for taking time out of your busy afternoon to call us and share that knowledge with us.
That's very good, and my condolences does go out to Tupac's family.
You can just tell by the calls we just received. For the last hour and a half, my phone line's been backed up, 4, 5, 6 lines at a time, and everybody is sad. A lot of people can't really believe the fact that Tupac has actually died. I think the biggest problem is everybody is worried about the violence and the retaliation that goes with some crime of this nature. Sad day in the music industry.
So as you did your follow-up and your investigation into this, and you spoke to people, what do you think it was about Tupac specifically that led to such a cultural reaction? And even the rumors that maybe it was all faked and he was living a life somewhere, I know those persisted for years as well.
Yeah, those were, I didn't concentrate much on the, I deal with facts,
Sure.
So I just, say the truth. And, that stuff eventually, for the most part, died down. But KCEP did an incredible job the entire time. I loved that station. And, but I think that Tupac was so much bigger than life. He was so charismatic, and it was hard to believe that he was killed in just a drive-by shooting like that. But also part of what fueled it was the secrecy surrounding, the cops didn't want to come out with, and it made it look like they were hiding something when in fact they weren't. They were just trying to make it go away. But Tupac was such a, he was bigger in life in death than he was in life. But and then 6 months later, another drive-by shooting, and his one-time homie and rapper Biggie Smalls was himself killed as well. So, and that fueled both murder investigations. Tupac's was bigger, but Biggie was large as well.
Yeah, and for the record, Cathy, you also wrote the book on who murdered Biggie Smalls. Is that correct? That's the right title? The
killing of Tupac Shakur and the murder of Biggie Smalls.
That's right. Cathy, I really appreciate you taking the time to, once again, I can't imagine how many times you've talked about this topic, but reflect on it with me as we look back at that 1996 event. My
pleasure. Thanks so much.
Yep. And we do have some updates to this story. So after the break, we'll actually connect with a KLAS 8 News Now reporter to talk about what has been happening with Cathy D and the latest bit of court and investigation into the shooting of Tupac Shakur. So stay with me. I'll be right back. Welcome back. Again, I'm Chip Brewster with Nexstar Media. We continue the conversation about the 1996 shooting and ultimate death of Tupac Shakur, but we are going to fast forward now to current day, because even though this happened nearly 30 years ago at the time of this recording anyway, this is still a developing case as to who pulled the trigger, who handed the gun, who ordered the hit, etc. So let us look at what a grand jury was given as far as evidence goes, and bring in then David Charns, who is an investigative reporter. So he's the one leading off this story from KLAS 8 News Now in Las Vegas.
The intersection behind me is where Tupac was killed back in September of 1996. He would die 6 days later from his injuries. And we have learned the grand jury met at least 5 times as prosecutors presented their evidence against Wayne Davis. Transcripts the 8 News Now investigators obtained paint a picture of what witnesses testified in secret grand jury hearings before the panel voted to indict Dwayne Cathy D. Davis in the murder of Tupac Shakur.
Ultimately, our persistence in this investigation has paid off.
It's an investigation that began with this video from 1996, a fight involving Shakur, record exec Suge Knight, and members of a rival gang. Hours later, Davis, the kingpin of that other group, allegedly ordered the retaliatory shooting. A Southside Crips gang affiliate testifying, Cathy is the one who's going to make all the arrangements and all the plans until that gun goes into somebody else's hand. Davis was sitting in the front passenger seat of another car when it pulled up side by side to Shakur's. In his book, Davis says he handed a gun to a passenger in the back seat who then fired. Metro Police showing this diagram Friday with Orlando Anderson, Davis's nephew, and DeAndre Smith in the back seat. Both are deceased. The gang member saying, when he passed the firearm to Orlando didn't have a clear shot. Big Dre is 6'6". At this time, he's 370, 400. He's big. You're not going to reach over like that because shells would have been popping all in Big Dre's face and all kind of stuff. When asked if Smith was the shooter, the gang affiliate told the grand jury he did the shooting.
Dwayne Davis was the shot caller for this group of individuals that committed this crime, and he orchestrated the plan that was carried out.
A member of Shakur's security team saying he saw a, quote, larger size arm fire the shots. That man also telling the grand jury in the moments after the shooting, he approached a wounded Shakur who told him, quote, get on the ground, they're going to shoot you. Shakur wasn't talking about Davis's group, but responding police officers who thought the shooter was among the rapper's entourage. Also shown to the grand jury, videos and other exhibits like photos that have never been seen by the public before. We expect to get our hands on that next week. Near Flamingo and Koval, I'm David Charns.
And in fact, they did, but we're going to talk about that in a moment. Let me bring in David Charns now, who is joining us from Las Vegas. And David, I think the biggest question asked whenever this comes up is, why did it take nearly 30 years to get a grand jury, or really anyone, on a charge for the shooting and ultimate death of Tupac Shakur?
Right. That is a great question. I mean, this all happened in September 1996, and those grand jury hearings happened in the summer of 2023. There were 5 of them, and then Cathy D. Davis wasn't arrested until the end of September of 2023. I think that Las Vegas police would look at this case, kind of put it on the shelf, look at this case, kind of put it on the shelf, and come back to it. Honestly, what prompted this all to happen in that summer was the detective who had taken over this case was about to retire. And they wanted to kind of seal this off and have it in a nice little package and give it to prosecutors. And that all kind of culminated in 2023 with then them bringing this case to prosecutors, and then the prosecutors finally hearing this and then having this arrest for what was 27 years after Tupac's murder.
What's interesting is, and we spoke with Cathy Scott right before this break where we were speaking with you, and she literally wrote the book on the shooting of Tupac Shakur. She was one of the Las Vegas Sun reporters that covered it in real time as it was happening. And her takeaway from the time was that if you think about the place that it happened and how it went down, the primary witnesses were gang members, one side or the other. And their thing was street justice, she said. And so they didn't want to talk to police. There weren't cameras capturing that shooting. There wasn't good hard evidence, even in the grand jury story that you showed us. That was a gang member who was not present who was giving that information. And so just that the crux of your case laid with people who weren't going to talk to you. I mean, how do you do the investigation?
I think there are two big points that you make here. One is that the whole crux of this prosecution is what Cathy D said and what he wrote in his book. He says, I was there, we drove up side by, he doesn't actually say I am the shot caller here, but he alludes to the fact that he's involved. And it's in his book about his time in Compton and then the Tupac killing. What you see in those grand jury transcripts is, you're right, there is no eyewitness who says, I saw this person. You heard that gang affiliate say that there was an arm maybe, and then Orlando Anderson, who's Dwayne Davis's nephew, was involved, but there's no video, right? There's this 1996. You see the video in that story, which is from the MGM during the fight in the hours before Tupac's murder. It's not good video. There's no fingerprints, there's no gun, there's no DNA. So in today's, what I call the CSI world, where we're so used to, the DNA matches the weapon and everyone goes to prison and it's all nicely done and wrapped in a bow, that doesn't exist here. And what prosecutors are relying on are the interviews and the writings of Dwayne Davis himself. And that could be difficult to prove in a court of law. But at the same time, we don't know who their surprise witnesses are going to be. This trial is scheduled for next winter. There are a lot of surprises that happen in murder cases, and they could have evidence that they're just waiting to show us or show a jury at some point that would make Cathy D seem more guilty than he does right now.
Now, when did you personally get involved, and by personally I mean professionally, with covering this case?
Yeah, in 1996, I was in second grade.
That's why I didn't think that was the case.
And I remember hearing about this, obviously. And then, here in Las Vegas, there's a lot of things that have happened, obviously, a lot of historical moments. And one of the things that I was interested in when I got here was actually this shooting. And a lot of people come here and they go to that site near where that video that you're seeing, and there is no memorial. There's literally just a power pole with some people who have written some things on it, but there's no marker to show where that was. Honestly, I do a lot of crime and justice here. Our investigative unit does a lot of crime and justice. And I was on vacation on the East Coast in July of 2023. I came home and I got a tip literally the next day that there was a raid at Dwayne Davis's house. And my photographer and I went out there, and it's a very nice neighborhood, a middle-class neighborhood in Henderson, Nevada, which is a suburb outside of Las Vegas. And we walk up to the house, and Dwayne Davis's son is sitting in the garage. And, I don't really like to run up people with a camera when you're not really sure, but you got to feel it out at first. So we go up to the garage, and he's sitting in the garage, the son, and I say, does Dwayne Davis live here? Well, the son's name is also Dwayne Davis. And I think I had a Channel 8 shirt or something. And he said, no, you guys are confused. Well, that's the house, and that's where the raid was less than 12 hours before. And he actually followed us back to our car and threatened us to leave. And that's when I knew it was the right house. And that day, we really started compiling all this information, and we were able to break the story that police had done this raid, which essentially was the first time we knew that this case was active and open. And then over the next couple months, we knew that the grand jury was meeting. And then on a Friday in September 2023 is when we knew that he was arrested on a walk outside of his house. And that's when we did the story that you just saw.
And I will say, it is not typical of a We Witnessed to do a event that is still ongoing. And so for anyone that is watching this, I hope these are being watched for years to come. So anyone that is watching this and the trial has eventually happened, David Charns is going to continue covering it. So KLAS is the place to go to see what ultimately took place. So let's just, knowing that I'm speaking to the future at this point, what are the next steps at this moment for this case and for the investigation?
So he recently switched attorneys. He had an attorney who had represented him for about a year. It took a while to find an attorney who would take the case. There was obviously this is a big case. It's a lot of evidence. You're going to be on TV. So there was some time for him to find a private attorney. That took several months. He found one. He's now switched to a new pair of attorneys. And those attorneys kind of are saying what the old attorney said is he's lying, right? He don't believe what he's saying. There's one really interesting thing that they told me, which was, he might have his name on that book, but that doesn't mean that he knows what's in it, and that doesn't mean that he actually wrote it, which is a really interesting argument, right?
Yeah.
You know, celebrities write their books, they're often ghostwritten. You would think that you would know what was in your book with your name on it, with your face on it, but Keefe D has also told us, my colleague Vanessa Murphy has spoken with him in jail several times, and he says, I was just trying to make money. There's a whole side to the story that he's in his early 60s, he is not in great health, and that he just wanted to leave a good chunk of money to his family before he died. He says that that's why he started doing these interviews in 2018, 2019 about how he witnessed this murder, how he allegedly orchestrated the murder, and then the book comes out. So it's really going to come up, and the lawyers are going to try to say, well, he was just lying, don't believe him. That's why it's so important for the prosecutors to try to come forward with someone who actually has something more than just, oh yeah, I heard he did it, versus, oh, I saw he did it.
Right.
Or yes, I was there at the MGM. I heard them conspiring, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're waiting for, and we just haven't seen that yet.
Okay, well, thank you for catching us up to the now. And again, for everyone watching this in the future, check out David's reporting to see what has been happening with this case. And on behalf of David and Cathy both, I'm Chip Rooster. Thank you so much for watching this episode of We Witnessed.